the second in the series on using the power of Excel 2007. This particular session is going to kick it up a notch, as Lynn just told me. The first in the series was more of an introductory level one, and this is definitely going to hit more intermediate to advanced. So I think you'll be learning more sophisticated applications of Excel. Just as by way of introduction, Lynn is a full-time certificated person at Mount San Jacinto College, which of course is our partner institution in the @ONE grant, and we're thrilled to have both Lynn and San Jacinto College as partners in @ONE. And Lynn teaches office applications and introductory computing classes with the CIS department. And she's consulted with both commercial and government agencies on applications. And I know that since she's joined us, our interest and attendance and evaluation of the Excel sessions that she's taught have gone up considerably. So she's doing a great job for us. So I think you will enjoy it immensely. Let me move on to a few housekeeping things so that we can have a good experience here. First of all, if you haven't already maximized your Confer window, please go ahead and do that. I'm going to ask all of you to mute your phone by hitting *6. That keeps the background noise and distractions to a minimum. If Lynn asks you for questions and she wants those by phone, you can always hit *6 again to unmute. The other way you can ask questions is by using the chat window over to the left, and you can send chat messages directly to the whole room by typing in there and posting your question, or privately to anyone in the drop-down box. There's two other features that you should be aware of. First of all, this session has closed captioning, and you can use that function by hitting the little CC icon up in the top left-hand part of the window, and that'll bring up a separate window with the captioning in it. You can save the presentation or the chat or both by using the icon, the little disk icon, the far left-hand top of the window. And then finally, sometimes during these sessions, the facilitator will ask questions where they would like a yes or no answer, and you can post your answer to those questions by using the green check mark up at the top or the red X. And I think with that, we've covered all the housekeeping things. I will try and address questions in the chat box, and if I can't answer them, I will save them for Lynn as she pauses to take questions. So with that, Lynn, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, last week, if you joined us, our level was about beginning to intermediate. This week we are going to crank it up a little bit, and it's all going to be topics that are in the intermediate to advanced range. So today we're going to be talking about managing an analysis of data. We're going to deal with functions and creating our own formulas, using our data from multiple sheets, and summarizing our data with pivot tables, creating charts, and then at the very tail end, hoping that we have a lot of time, we're going to cover macros, which is just recording work that we do over and over and over again. So we can call it up once by just a keystroke or running that macro. It's a recording of what we do. So let's start in with talking with functions. And the power of Excel is that it does math for us. A lot of us don't like math. I'm probably odd man out here because I love math, but I don't necessarily always want to calculate things. So I rely on Excel to do a lot of those calculations for me. Excel has about 340 built-in functions, and they're categorized in library format. So if we're talking about a financial function, let's say calculating a payment of a car, well, that would be in financial. If it is working with dates and times. Let's say somebody purchases an item today and we need to find out 30 days from now what day would that be. That would be a date and time function. So they're pretty logically laid out, and it would be on our formulas tab where you can see all of them. And we'll be looking at that shortly. Common built-in functions for financial are future value and payments. Most of the functions are abbreviated in some sort, so we don't have to type them all out. So for future value, it's FV. Payment is PMT. For logical, we have ands and if, and several more. These are just the common ones. Date would be date and now, like what is the date now, what's the time now. For lookup and reference, hyperlink is a function. I know many of you are very familiar with hyperlinks that take you to a place on the web. Well, Excel has hyperlinks that not only take you to the web, but will take you to a place in your document or to another document altogether. We have what's called a VLOOKUP, which is a reference function. It will go look up the value for you and retrieve it. So that one's very handy, and we'll be looking at that one today. We have math and trig, like sum and product. We can work with text. So we have concatenation. If we have two words and we want to merge those words into one big long word, it's concatenation. Or let's say you type in a name, and for instance, back in the chat room, I typed in Barbara with a lowercase b. I can type in Barbara with a lowercase b, and if I use this function of proper, Excel will capitalize that first B in Barbara because that's the proper use of capitalization. For statistics, we have average, standard deviation, and many, many more. And engineering, we have convert, which is very, very useful. And again, we have about 340 of these built-in functions. These are the most common. We can also create functions by having our functions that we're using, the built-in, plus some more math. Or we can have a simple calculation like 1 plus 1. Well, that's using addition. So we have these mathematical operators that we can build our own functions with. We have addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and then a combination of those and or our formulas from our built-in functions. We also have user-defined functions. Now, user-defined functions, you have to get into Excel and start programming. And we are not going to do this today. But there is a way that we can, let's say we are bankers, and there's a financial function that is not in our built-in functions that is just for me, the loan officer. I can program into Excel this custom function and call it, I don't know, Lynn function. And then the next time that I use it, I just have to call up Lynn, and it will work for me. So with all of that, I'm going to share my desktop so we can get to Excel and play around with a few of these functions and see them in action. I'm also going to send this file that I have that I'm going to be working with to you all, that if you want to play with it later on in the day, feel free. So you'll see a little pop-up window coming on to that I'm sending everyone a file. And if you want it, go ahead and accept it. If you don't, go ahead and ignore it. And while that's going on, I'm going to share my desktop so you can see Excel as well. Now, everybody should see Excel. Please let me know if you don't see it. What I have on my screen here, I have some information that is pretty standard in Excel classes where folks are going to calculate a payment for a home. Excel has a built-in function called PMT for payment. And we're going to use this, but we're also going to play with a little bit of math for Excel as well.
This is still wordy. I don't see it, and I don't believe other people are seeing it.
Okay. Let me.
You know, I don't see it on my screen.
There we go.
Is it there now?
Yes, it's not.
Okay. Monitors and outside.
Oh,
Okay. For that.
There we go. Great. Thank you.
There it is. So here we have some information. Calculate a price of the house, and I found it interesting that the median price of the home for the top 10 locations, I just grabbed that information from the web. So if you guys want to live at Manhattan Beach, the median price of the home is $1.7 million.
Sure.
So let's figure out what it would cost me per month to live in Manhattan Beach. And I'm going to choose my down payment amount. And I'm just going to say I'm going to put 25% down. So my amount of my down payment would be the price of the home multiplied by the down payment. All functions for Excel start with an equal sign, basically telling Excel, hey, Excel, you need to do some math here. So I'm going to take the price of the home and click on the cell, multiplied by, which is the asterisk, the down payment percent. So my down payment amount is $443,000. My loan amount is going to be my price of my home minus my down payment. So again, I'm going to tell Excel, do the math for me. And I'm just going to click on the cell so Excel can find the information. So my loan amount is going to be about $1.3 million. And let's say I don't have such great credit right now, and my interest rate for this home is going to be 7%, or even better yet, 8%. So at an 8% interest, and my loan amount is going to be the total 30 years, so in months, 360 months. So let's figure out what my monthly payment for this home would be. Excel has its payment function, so I'm going to tell it, use the payment function, equal PMT, and you'll see that it pops up and gives me some prompts. It wants the interest rate. Well, I have the interest rate stored here in cell F5, so I'm going to use it. But this is annual interest rate, so I do need to divide it by 12, comma. The number of payments is going to be the 360 months, and the present value is going to be my loan amount, the $1.3 million. So my payment per month is going to be $9,766. Well, that's not bad. I think I'll buy two. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in the rest of this table really quickly. And we have an autofill button that we can double click and see, let's see, make sure that it's picking up all the right information. It changed my percent, so I'm going to say 25% down for all of these homes. And now my calculation is working out right. So this is more like it. The statewide median for a house price is about $350,000. If I put 25% down, it would be $87,000, making my loan amount $263,000. At 8% would be about $1,900 a month. Pretty powerful because Excel is not only calculating the flat interest rate, but it's also combining what are you paying for interest and what are you paying towards the principal. And it figures that out over the duration because of this built-in function. So let's try one more built-in function on this sheet, and I'm going to calculate future value. I'm going to make a payment every year and sock away $2,000. at 2% interest for 5 years. And I want to figure out at the end of those 5 years, how much money will I have? Well, what Excel does is that I could figure out 2% interest on $2,000 and do that for 5 years. So over 5 years, I put away $10,000, and 2% of that $10,000 is about $200. But that's not compound interest. I need to figure out interest on my first $2,000 for that year, then on my next $4,000, because now I have interest on top of that. And for me, it's just a big old mess. But for Excel to figure it out, it has a built-in function called future value, which is FV. It wants its rate, which is the 2%. The number of payments is for 5 years. And the value is $2,000. After 5 years, I'm going to have $10,408. So I made $408 worth of interest. Those are using built-in functions. For the list of functions, if you go to your Formula tab, there's an Insert function. This will list all of them for you. If you change it to All, and here are all of the built-in functions. And you'll see some of them look very familiar, like average. There's an average, and it will tell you what it needs. Let's say account. Again, it tells you what it needs. Account if. I'm going to show you one of those. A date function, what day something lands on. All kinds of functions here. Like I said, 340 of them about. So here's the library itself. If you know what type of function it is, you can look inside the library. So if I know it's a financial function, here are all of my financial functions. If I know it is a statistical function, these are all my statistical functions. Quite a few of them. So let's go back to our presentation. And we're going to continue this idea of functions, but we're also going to talk about using your Excel, all of the sheets in the Excel spreadsheet. So that's called a three-dimensional reference. Then we have grouping our sheets. So if we want to do some formatting on one sheet and that is propagated to, I don't know, 3 other sheets, we can do it all at once by grouping our sheets together. And then hyperlinks. Hyperlinks, we can go to a web page, we can go a place in our Excel document, and we can go into another document outside of Excel. So let me go back and I'll show you some examples of this. And on my sheet, I already have some information. One is exchange rate. And this is using not only a built-in, but it's all three-dimensional reference. Because I just have some slight information here. So I have US dollars. If I want to know how many euros $1,000 is, I just put in $1,000, and Excel does all the calculations for me to figure out that it's 778 euros. But I can also translate that into Hong Kong dollar, or Mexican peso, or Swiss franc. But I have some formulas going on behind the scenes, although it's very simple for me to click down on a button on this little list and choose what I want to transfer it into from dollars to rupees. There's some other things going on. So let me show you what's going on here. There's a way to see all of my formulas at one time, and you hold down Control and hit the grave mark, which is on a regular standard keyboard. that's right above the tab. And you can see I have a formula in here called the VLOOKUP formula. It's looking up some information in a table. And it's looking up cell A5 here in this sheet. So it's looking up Indian rupee in a table that's not on this sheet. It's on another sheet, this data 2 sheet, in certain cells, and it's bringing me back some information that's in column 3. Then I multiply it by the amount of the US dollars that I want, which is 1,000 US dollars. Let me turn off my formulas, and I'm going to show you what's on the data 2 sheet. It's just a table. Argentine peso, this is how much in US dollars an Argentine peso is. Here it is per US dollar. Here is the table I'm using on the 3D referencing page. The reason why it's called 3D is because if I was referencing a cell that is just on the same sheet, I'm horizontal and I'm vertical. It's a two-dimensional reference. But I'm also going down into all of these different sheets all the way down to the data 2 sheet. So it has that third dimension. Now this lookup function, what it does is it says grab Indian rupee, go all the way over here to the data 2, and in this column look for Indian rupee. Here's the Indian rupee. Then bring me back whatever in column 3, because I designated column 3. 1, 2, 3. It brings back 49.678 and then multiplies it by 1,000. And that's the amount that I get. Backwards, I can go and look up Japanese yen. How many is 1,500 Japanese yen? $15. So, using this idea of three-dimensional reference, I have a big table of information on my pivot table sheet, pardon me. And it's a lot of information. But I just want to know the count of the sections. So I'm going to make Excel do the work for me. I could go over here and say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I'm going to go ahead and make Excel do it for me. So I'm going to say equal, and the function is count. And it says count what? So I'm going to go over here and highlight what I want it to count. Count the number of sections. And I just want to count this whole entire column. So if there's any data, it's going to count it as a 1. But it's also going to count this top word as sections. So I need to go back and say -1, just for that word of section. And lo and behold, there's about 2,000 sections. But let's say I don't want to count all of the sections, but I only want to know the count of online sections. So Excel has a COUNTIF function. Equal COUNTIF, and it says what's my range that I'm counting. So I'm going to go back and get my range again, but this time it's where the location is, comma. And I want to count it only if it's an online class. So quote, online, in quote, parentheses, and there are 269 online sections. So that worked out well. I can do a count. I can do a COUNTIF in three-dimensional referencing. And now I want to do the total head count of students. Equal, it's a sum. I'm going to go back over to my other, and I'm going to click on column L, and it's only going to count, pardon me, it's only going to add up numerical data. So we have 42,099 students in each of the, in a total head count of students. That's three-dimensional referencing. Now, then we have something that we can use called grouping our sheets. So, for instance, I want to color cell A19 the background color of a light blue. But I also want to do that on data 1 and data 2. For some reason, all of these sheets need to look exactly the same. So what I can do is group those sheets. And since the sheets are not right next to each other, all I do is hold down the Control key and click on the sheets that I want to be grouped. On the page, you can, on the window, you will see that they turned a whiter color than this light blue. That means that they're active. Now I can apply my formatting. I'm just going to apply a background color of blue, and then deselect my grouping and go over and see, oh, good. A19 changed colors in data 1, and data 2, A19 also changed colors. Yes, they do need to be in the same file to group the sheets. If they're non-adjacent sheets, you can hold down the Control and click on each of the sheets that you want grouped. If they're adjacent sheets, you just need to hold down Shift. So let's say I want three-dimensional referencing all the way through macros. I hold down the Shift and it selects and groups all in between. There's two ways to ungroup it. One is to select one of the sheets that are not grouped within it, so I can select either built-in, data 1, data 2, and they'll ungroup, or I can right-click and say Ungroup Sheets, and then it ungroups them. Not only will this work for formatting, but it also works with building functions. So in this case, I can say, let me group my sheets again, 3D referencing, data and data 2, and in A8, I'm going to put in a silly formula that says add up cell B4 plus B13. I'm going to hit enter. Now on data 1, I have a formula that relates to it, and in data 2, I have also the same formula in there, and I only had to build the formula in one location. I'm going to ungroup my sheet. Does anybody have any question about grouping? Where I went to do the grouping, I actually just either held down the Control or hold down Shift. If they're adjacent to one another, if they're right next to one another, then I hold down the Shift. If they're non-adjacent, meaning there's other sheets separating them, then I can hold down the Control key and just click on the tabs of this of the sheet. So once again, I can click on Charts, and let's say I want to group it with built-in. Hold down Control and click, and now they're grouped together. To ungroup them, either right-click on the tab and hit Ungroup, or click one of the ungrouped sheets. Let's move on to pivot tables. And what pivot tables do is takes a large group of information and we can work with it, and Excel will do all of the grunt work for us. So as you saw with the 3D referencing, I have some counts and I had some total head counts of students, and I had to do kind of a lot of work to do that. Well, no, but in essence, I can even do less work and have Excel do it for me. So I have an incredible amount of data here. And what I can do is tell Excel to build a pivot table, which means a summary of the data that I have. So on your Insert tab, click on Pivot Table. This will find the table of data that I want to build a pivot table with. Excel is pretty clever on figuring out what you want, but if it doesn't figure out exactly what you want, right here in this selection you can change it. I want my pivot table in a new worksheet, so I can just select new worksheet, or I can tell it put it into an existing, but in this case let's do new worksheet. A new worksheet will open, pardon me, and I can start grabbing information. Now, over in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see there's some column labels. some row labels and values, and a report filter. Let's say I want to create a report that only counts the number of sections in the accounting department. Well, I'm going to want to filter only the accounting department, so that will go into my report filter, and I'm just clicking on it, dragging and dropping it in there. My column labels, my row labels can be my sections or the course itself. And I also want to add up the number of students that are in the class. So I'm going to take in my use values and do sums. Now right now, Excel is picking up every single department. But on this down arrow, I can say select multiple items and only show me the accounting. And bingo, Excel has figured out, okay, I'm only going to show you the accounting, and I'm only going to show you accounting 075, 080, 124, 125, 126, 127, and for each of those, I'm going to tell you how many students there are and the grand total. Now that was really fast and easy. I did not have to look at that whole entire data and figure out where everything was and count it up and separate it. I can also, instead of doing departments, I can say, I'm just going to drag this off and drop it. You'll see that it becomes an X. And I can say, okay, instead of department, I want location. And I want to know how many students are at each location. And again, this will immediately tell me, okay, at MVC there's 20,000 off-site, there's 2,800 online, there's 6,300, and at SJC it's 1,200 students. It's doing all of the work for me. I can also add more information with column labels. Say, okay, per instructor, we have multiple instructors. How many students do each instructors have, and at which campus are they teaching? So here's all the MVC students, MVC instructors, and it shows me how many students they have in their classes. And that was just a drag and a drop. Let me see if I can get down to one of our other campuses. Here, San Jacinto has 1,200 students, and it breaks it down to instructors. So you can see just with a drag of a drop of each of these items, I can build a whole entire table really quickly. That's the power of Excel's pivot tables. So that's a long line of instructors, so I'm going to go ahead back all the way up at the top and just keep it at the, I can do department as well, so let's see. I want department, and let's say I want accounting and art and economics. And here it will show me in those areas, this is how many students we have. Pretty powerful, pretty quick. And another thing that we can do with pivot tables is we can immediately build a chart of this information that I've pulled out. So in our options, we have pivot chart. Just click on pivot chart, choose the type of chart you want, and say OK. And it will immediately build me a chart with this information. I can also say, this chart I only want to show the 2 main campuses. And it immediately updates it. This is much different than a regular chart. Once you build a regular chart, it will update the values according to where you grabbed your data, but it won't be able to filter out like a pivot chart can using this filter pane. You won't be able to do this on the fly. Speaking of normal charts, let's go ahead and grab some information, and I'm just going to build a quick table. So let's say company ABC, company DEF, and company GHI. They have quarterly reports, so they have a first quarter. They have a second quarter, they have a third quarter, and a fourth quarter. And I'm going to be talking about their inventory maybe. So company ABC has an inventory of 50, DEF has 65, and GHI is 45. And just making up numbers on the fly, 98. So I can build a chart. Okay, so I have some information and I want to build a chart. And the chart is going to just be a standard line chart or a column chart. But I need to tell Excel what information is going to build this chart. So whatever information it is, I'm going to highlight it. And how I do that is just I click in one cell, drag my mouse down, and then I let go of the mouse. Go to Insert. And here are the charts that I have at my disposal. I can build a column chart, a line, a pie, a bar, area, so on and so forth. I want to create a column chart. And I have many, many ways of building this column chart, so I'm just going to click on one that I like, which is three-dimensional cluster. And here we go. Excel did all the work for me. I can change the layout of my chart just by clicking on this layout area, chart layout. And they'll give you some options. I can have a chart title and how I'm going to change my chart title. Just click on it and say lens chart. I can change the placement of my legend just by clicking on it and saying format legend, and I want it on the bottom. I can change the look and the style of the chart very quickly by selecting on a look. I can move it to a sheet all on its own. Say, put it on a new sheet. Now it's a nice big chart. So I can manipulate this chart. And if I go back to charts and I change one of these values to 300, my chart will also change because it's linked to that data. Now I don't have the capabilities like a pivot to where I can say, oh, I don't want to show company DEF, but I do want to show the others. I would have to change where my source data is coming from. But these are very, very handy as well. If I decide I don't want a column chart after all, I can change my chart type and decide on a line or a pie. And Excel will do all the changes and updates for me. Now I want to go back to the presentation just momentarily. And I want to talk about charts and selecting a chart type. The hardest part about figuring out what chart types is ultimately your data is the most important item. And column charts compare different categories. Likewise with line. Pie will compare the relative values of different categories to the whole thing. Now, pie charts are really nice, but sometimes they don't make any sense for your data, so you do need to be careful on what type of chart. So on this slide, I gave you an idea of what each type of chart should be used for. You will have access to this PowerPoint afterwards, so I don't want to go too much further into here. So now, we can also bring our chart and take it into, let's say, Word or a PowerPoint. And let me go back to Excel. And I'm going to go back to my data. And I'm going to build a second chart. So I'm highlighting my data, going to Insert, and this time I want a pie chart. I don't know why, but I do. My pie chart. And for ABC, for the first, second, third, fourth quarter, I have this pie chart. If I wanted, I could copy this over to either PowerPoint or Word, and it's just right-clicking, say copy, going over to Word, and pasting it into Word. And Word will stop you at that point and will say, do you want to link this chart? And if you say yes, that means any changes that you do in Excel will propagate to your Word document as well, because it's linked actually to Excel. So if I decide that this is now 500, or even better yet, 1200, that will update your chart that's in Word once you open up Word or PowerPoint. So many of us do our presentations in PowerPoint, but then we don't know what to do with our charts that we created in Excel. Well, you can just copy and paste them in there and they'll be linked together. Are there any questions about charts before we move on to the hard topic of macros? Okay. I'm not going to bother going back to box plot. I don't use box plots very often, so I'm going to go ahead and check on other charts. And here are the built-in other charts. And you can see that there's, might be under stock, that you might see something similar to a box chart. You could do an area, but yeah, just the high, low, close is pretty close to a box plot. You might be able to use something like that. Yeah. There's also, let me go back to this for one more second. There's also, if you have a chart, there are charts on the Microsoft website that you can download, and you can bring those into Excel. There's templates. And if you have any templates in here from the Microsoft website, you can use those as well. So you might check on the Microsoft site. Okay. For macros, macros are just recordings of either the changes that I've put in Excel. For instance, I have some information here. It just so happens to be the currency exchange rate, but I want to be able to quickly change a font to, let's say, 28 and color it a dark blue background and a white font, and I want underlined. And I want to be able to do all of that really, really quickly every single time. Let's say you have school colors or you have a company colors that you use often. There's a way of doing it in styles, but there's also a way of doing it by using a macro. So I want to record everything that I've done. Selecting the cell, changing the font color, changing the background color, changing, let's say, whatever it may be. So I want to record that. I'm going to undo everything that I did right there. And I'm going to record it. So over on your, pardon me, where's my thing? Over on my View tab, I have what's called a macro. I'm going to click my macro button, and I'm going to start recording my macro. Down arrow. And I want to record a new macro. I'm going to give my macro a name, and I'm going to say Lynn's Formatting. If I want, I can give it a control shortcut key. And for this, I'm going to say Y. I'd give it a description, so later on when I come back to it, I'd realize what I'm doing. And then say OK. As soon as I click on OK, it's starting to record me. It's not recording me just moving the mouse. But as soon as I click on something, or if I change any of the attributes or properties to Excel, that is what it's recording. So I'm going to go to the Home tab. I'm going to make the background a bright pink. I'm going to make the font color white, and I'm going to make the font 36, and let's just pick one. And I'm going to resize my column. And I'm going to stop recording. Right down here at the bottom, you'll see a stop, just like in the old recording days. I'm going to stop. Now, if you remember, I did a shortcut key of Control-Y. I can click on any cell that I want now, and I can apply that macro just by Control-Y. And there it is, right there. It did all of the steps for me. Okay, that's kind of handy, but I can do some other things too for macros. Let's say I want to have a couple macros built into where one, it will sort this to where the in US dollars goes from high to low, the per dollars go from high to low, and then back to where my sorting is in order by country, currency. So I'm going to create a macro that does that. So I go back to my view, macro, record a macro, and in this one I'm going to say in US high. So I want to do it from high to low. I'm going to give it a control key of a K. I say OK. So now I'm starting to record my steps. I'm going to highlight my cells. I'm going to go to Data, Sort, make sure that my data has headers in US dollars from largest to smallest, and say OK. And then I'm going to stop my recording. I just did one macro. Now I'm going to do another macro to where it does per US dollar from high to low. So again, I'm going to go to View, Macro, Record Macro. So per US from high to low. And this time I'm going to give it a J, say OK. And again, repeat the steps. So now I can go to Sort, per dollar from largest to smaller, and say OK, and stop my macro. And I want to do one more time where it takes my currency back to exchange. Now, if I do decide to give it, somebody asked if there's some standard shortcut keys that we have, like Control-V does an undo, Control-P will do a print. If I assign one of my macros to one of those letters, it overrides the standard control keys. So I'm using keys that I don't usually use, like a K, a J, and this one I'm going to do, this time I'm going to do an H because I don't use H. But you want to be careful if you are giving it a control key. So again, I'm going to go and record my macro. And this time it's going to be currency. I'm going to get an H. OK. Let's see. Oh, it didn't like my name. Let's say it is, I'm just going to say country. Maybe it doesn't like the C. I don't know what it didn't like. I didn't read it. H. Let's do capital H. And say OK. Now I'm going to do the same thing. Go to Data, Sort, this time currency from A to Z, and say OK. Stop my macro. And now I have those three macros recorded. So I can use them now. Let's say per US dollar. Control J. Now it did all of those steps for me, real instantly. Another one, Control K. Now it sorted it by in US dollars from high to low. And let's go ahead and put the currency countries back into order. And that one was Control Shift H. So you can see macros will save me time. Now that was just a few steps, but I can record hundreds of steps, or just one. Those control keys, that's what those are macros. Now the only thing that's new or that would stop us from doing macros is now that I have a macro in this Excel sheet, I have to save it to Excel as a macro-enabled worksheet. Otherwise, if I sent this worksheet to you right now as it is, you won't have these macros. So I need to make sure that I save as, and right here it is a macro-enabled workbook. Now what happens is not only does the workbook will be sent to you, but those macros will be sent to you as well. And with all of the security issues nowadays, you definitely want to make sure that folks know you're sending them a workbook with macros so they know it's safe. And I would say safe. So are there any questions? Oh, Clint, did I resize the column or did the macro? For some reason, the macro did not pick up me resizing the column, so I actually had to do that. For some reason, it just didn't pick it up. If you know anything about programming, you could go into Visual Basic, break open your macro, and see what the macro is doing. For instance, view macros, and I can view all my macros, and I can say edit. So let's find the formatting one, and I can edit it. And here's all the coding that went into that. So I can say columns, entire column, auto fit. It's there, but for some reason it didn't pick it up. It could be that it's only selecting column A, and I can change that to column D, or wherever I was, and say save it, and close it out and go back to Excel. So now when I run that macro again, I can say, let's go D, and say control, I think it was control Y, and nothing was in there, so let me undo that. Let me do something really long in here. And then control Y. There it goes. When you're creating your macro, Tom's question is, can you easily store comments with each macro? You can when you're designing your macro. When I say view macro, and when I'm creating that macro name, it gave me a place where it said a description. What I can do is in this description say exactly what this does. And that will give me an idea later on. Let's say 5 years from now, I don't remember what that, I gave it the macro name of country, but I don't know exactly what it does. You would want to put a description in that area. So any other questions? Let me go back to the sheet really quick and just run over. You can also delete your macros. So go back to your macro list and just hit on delete. The other thing is some folks don't have the macros automatically in there. So believe it or not, there's a hidden tab in Excel, and you can go inside this following these directions and you'll get this developer tab, which will have a lot more information regarding macros. You'll have this code group and the macros. The standard macro, where it was just recording and editing your macros, is pretty good. The Pareto chart, I believe, is with, if I'm not mistaken, I've heard of that before, and I think it was with my database design class, if I'm not mistaken. But you can see, yes, thank you. You can go on the World Wide Web for the charts and the macros that other people, but you want to be really, really careful. Just go to Microsoft and see what's out there that Microsoft has deemed safe. Just go ahead and go to office.microsoft.com, and you can look on their templates. You can look in their macros there, see what other people have built, and it usually goes through the scrutiny of Microsoft to see if those are safe macros. For charts, you can also go to Microsoft and see if there is a template there, but I don't work with that chart very very, very much at all. In fact, none at all. I remember doing it a long time ago. But if it's not on the standard list, you can go to Microsoft and see if there's charts. You can also go to third parties and see what charts there are for Excel out there. Okay. Any more questions?
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Marty.
Yeah, this is Chitra.
Oh, hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Marty.
Yeah. I had one question on count, which you showed in 3D reference sheet.
Yes.
I think the first you showed was you selected the range and then you minused 1.
I did because I had to, right here on the 3D referencing, the total sections, I grabbed that whole entire column. And what it's going to do is it's going to count if something exists in that cell. If it's blank, it's not going to count it. But if you go back to my, my data,
yes.
You'll see at the very, very top, I don't want it to count the word section. But I do want to count everything else. So that's why I did the -1.
Oh, okay.
To accommodate that one word.
All right. Now, this count function, if it is count, it counts the numbers. But it doesn't count the text. If it is count text, then it is count A, right?
No, I'm only saying if there's something in that cell, count it. If there's nothing in the cell, don't count it. For instance, I can go back over to my data and I can say cat, and it's still going to count it because there's data inside that cell. See? Oh, it didn't count it. So
no, it doesn't count the numbers. If you have numbers, then you use count. If you have a text, as it is a group of characters that Excel recognizes, then it's count A. I think it's count A.
Yeah. You could, count A is, you're right, count A means count it if there is something in there, but if it's a non-empty cell.
Oh, yes, that's true. Okay. Okay. So in this situation, yeah.
So we would want to count A if we had a mixture of text and numerical values.
Right.
Account A. Account if makes that count this area up if it has some criteria. And we also have, in the new 2007 version, which we're working with, we have also a count if, meaning that there's more than one criteria. Okay. We can keep adding criteria after criteria after criteria.
Is that for the 2007 count if is? I think count if was there for 2003.
Count if, as in the single if, is available in 2003. Count if, as in the plural, is not available in 2003. It is available in 2007.
All right. Okay. I think it was wonderful. It was really good.
Thank you. I know it's a lot of information.
Yes, yes. And I would suggest that you should, if you have a class on just pivot tables, that would be wonderful. There's so much to learn about the pivot tables.
It is. We have a lot of, I use pivot tables we just went through and we're doing our 5-year report. And I did a bunch of pivot tables. It was so much faster than having me even do a regular chart. I did pivot charts, and it was very useful.
Oh, okay.
Well, and please send those kind of suggestions through the short survey that we ask at the end, because those are the kinds of things we're looking for as we plan for the seminars for the next term and beyond.
Okay.
And so this is Bill Doherty from At One again. I want to thank Lynn. This was extremely valuable, Lynn. It was very clear and well laid out and paced. I found it to be valuable. I certainly hope all the participants that attended today did. And the archive of this session will be available on our website in 24 to 48 hours. So if you want to reprise it or direct colleagues to it, please do so. And I think it was very valuable. So with that, I guess I'm going to say goodbye.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Lynn.
Mm-hmm.